I recently purchased a Sony FDR AX33 video camera, and I was very interested in this camera because although it was not the best camera on the market for 4K video, it was less than $1,000, and it had a good optical stabilizer system. I wanted to use the camera for vacations, family activities, etc. And I wanted to know if you could correct the video using the tools available in Premiere Pro 2015. Just how much work would it take to do the color correction to get fairly reasonably looking video? Before purchasing the camera, I read several reviews. They noted that there were no built-in neutral density filters with this particular model. So I used several filters for all of the shoots coming up. One was a UV filter, then a circular filter put on top of that, and finally a neutral density filter, number 4. The last thing I wanted to cover before we go to the video clips was the camera settings. There are 3 that I wanted to note. One is I filmed in 4K video with 100 megabits per second. That particular setting allows you to capture the very best video, but you cannot take stills at that setting. You only can do that at 60 megabits per second. Second setting is the zebra pattern. You can use either a 70% or 100% for that. I chose 70%. The last feature is one of exposure. The camera has a nice feature that allows you to use the ring on the front of the camera to manually adjust one of several functions. And I chose to set it to adjust the exposure so I could manipulate that as I looked into the camera viewfinder and at the zebra pattern. Finally, it should be noted that I left all the other settings on automatic. Although the camera has quite a number of settings, it was unlikely that I would use those, so I selected some that would be most useful for simply capturing people, events, and special circumstances. The venue for the shoot was Washington, D.C., and the Georgetown Waterfront Park. We started our trip over to the park on the Virginia side, crossing over the Francis Scott Key Bridge and overlooking the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal, which you will see as C&O Canal, and then making our way down to the north entrance of the park. The clips you see were taken along the entire length of the park, sometimes looking back at the Key Bridge, and sometimes looking toward the Kennedy Center. The first shot was taken from the Virginia side of the Key Bridge. The filters were on, but I didn't really pay attention to the zebra pattern. I just pointed the camera and began to shoot. You can see the image is rather flat. This is the full video clip. Here we have the Lumetri scope showing a shot from the middle of the clip. You can see the RGB curve and the lumens curve. Both are exceeding the range that they should be in. This is the first frame of the clip you just saw, but it's been corrected using a very nice tool that Adobe has included in its Premiere Pro CC copy for 2015 called the Lumetri Color Tool. So I use that tool to adjust the clip as you see it. The clip looks much, much better, of course, and this tool is useful in applying all sorts of color corrections to the clip. You could do similar things with a variety of tools in the older versions of Premiere Pro, but this does a very nice job. So this is the clip with all the corrections applied. Looking at the Lumetri scope, with displays here, the RGB parade and luminosity, you can see that the color range and luminosity have now been brought into acceptable ranges. Although the lumimetry color tool does allow you to adjust the RGB curves and luminosity, it also provides you with some nice tools to tweak the tint and adjust things like the shadows, midtones, and highlights, as you see in this graph. A nice feature of this tool is the fact that the shadows, midtones, and highlights can be keyframes. So when you have a long zoom shot and you have quite a bit of change in exposure, you can adjust for it in the clip. This clip is shot crossing the key bridge, and there's no corrections made. It's followed immediately by a corrected clip. The first clip is rather flat, as is typical of most of the video that comes out of the camera uncorrected. After applying the corrections, the clip starts looking pretty good. The next several clips are challenging because of the high dynamic range, but some degree of correction was possible using the tools in Adobe Premiere. The C&O canal had a high dynamic range, and in the next clip, you'll see that it probably exceeded the dynamic range of the camera, as you can see in this area where I was not able to bring that out without overexposing the sky. Next shot was taken from the canal level. You can see there's a small change in the exposure that I was doing. This is the north entrance to the park, and I was able to correct exposure and color. This is a comparison of uncorrected and corrected first frame of a long zoom shot. I'm pretty pleased with how the corrections brought out the color. As you zoom out, the exposures change, and being able to keyframe the shadows, midtones, and highlights help keep this clip looking fairly good. This is another comparison of uncorrected and corrected. This one was not as successful as the previous one. It's pretty clear that I probably should have done some stabilization correction, but it also gives you in this shot some idea of the 13 to 1 zoom ratio of the camera. Part of the challenge, of course, is that the scene, when you zoom out, does change the lighting quite a bit. So the zebra pattern is actually changing as you zoom out. And be able to adjust the exposure and do the zoom at the same time was beyond my capability. And this scene seems a little bit, as we zoom into the rowers, seemed a bit too red, but I was not able to adjust that properly. This is the first frame of a clip which has been underexposed and then corrected using the lumimetry color tool. Another challenging shot is coming up with the high reflectivity of the river. In this particular clip, probably could have used an ND8 filter. The colors in this clip are pretty realistic. This is another challenging shot because there's a lot of reflective surfaces, but I was able to correct most of the overexposure. I captured the last frame of this clip to show you uncorrected and corrected video. The lighting was very nice in this clip and seemed to come out pretty well with not a lot of adjustment. Finally, we take a look at a still picture from the camera, which I deliberately underexposed and was able to correct it using Adobe Premiere. So the bottom line is that you can get some pretty good video from this camera, but it does take a little work to correct the images that come out of the camera. Even though I do not have a 4K television set at this time, I like the idea of being able to capture the video in the highest resolution possible at a reasonable price. However, I do have a 4K video monitor, and I'm able to enjoy the videos in the highest resolution on that monitor. I'd appreciate any comments you might have to help me improve my videography as well as my editing. Thanks for watching.